First of all, I want to say welcome to all of you who are here. We appreciate your attendance. I also want to remind you there are people who are joining us by live stream, and welcome them too. So for the benefit of all of those people, and I'm the worst offender there is, everybody please speak into a mic, both in the audience when you either ask questions or weigh in, and all the curators. Now, the first thing we are going to do today is we're going to do the student representative report to the Board of Curators, Courtney Lauer. It was set first because we weren't sure that Student Representative Lauer was going to be with us for the entire meeting, let alone again, but we were very fortunate. We're going to get a keeper. This is not going to be the last meeting, but Courtney, are you ready? Okay.
All right, thank you, Chairman Steelman. I am very grateful for this opportunity once again to stand before the board for the student rep report. Myself, along with the students of ISC, are very glad that the last student report was able to start dialogue on numerous topics on each campus. Similar to last time, I will speak about each campus, their events, their concerns, before yielding to the board for any questions. Like last time, if I do not have the answer with me today, I will make sure to come back to the board with the requested information. So first, I want to start with the hosting campus, Mizzou. MSA, the undergraduate student organization here on campus, is implementing a themed coffee on the couch events. The themes will cover topics like career help, mental health, and the budget. The chancellor teamed up with MSA to take the time to meet with students in a more candid way. The initiatives of the program is to improve mentorship programs, especially to students who are not involved in campus organizations. MSA is also working on planning True Mizzou Week. During that week, discussion will center around the 4 core values of respect, responsibility, discovery, and excellence. This event will bring Tigers from all corners of campus together and will consist of different events on each of those days. Some other events or projects that MSA is currently working on is a Staff Appreciation Week, Sexual Assault Resource Guide, the Chancellor's Standing Committee, Mental Health Awareness Week, RSVP Center Phone Tree, Food and Security Task Force, and Bill Nye. Additionally, GPC has worked on their own initiatives. GPC has been looking at the national PhD programs and discovering how they are only geared towards academic job preparation. However, as mentioned in my last student report, only 50% of PhDs go into the academic profession. A huge potential market exists nationally for harnessing the potential of those students. While the campus continues to look at external internship opportunities, GPC is excited by the possibility of tacking on professional development experts from the Office of Graduate Studies who can work with industry partners to show how the transferable skills of PhD students can match those of the industry. For example, this is what's currently happening with Purina. Coupling with internship opportunities, the campus is increasingly interested in the Missouri method for teaching. Along with this method, internship opportunities are scaled up. GPC sees great potential in new internship programs within the campus to solve real-world problems. These programs could be implemented without significant bandwidth drain on faculty or staff by creating these graduate student internships where they serve as internship clusters. And board members, you did hear a little bit about this from Alex during the student leader luncheon. After the recent report on programs on Mizzou's campus, GPC saw a concern emerge. The concern is how to ensure that grad students in other programs can benefit in an interdisciplinary way, since there may not be opportunity to take grad seminars with those faculty. GPC continues to believe that restoring the Office of Graduate Studies, which is not an academic unit, to the graduate school, an academic unit, will help this concern by capturing the full value of faculty in those grad programs. Lastly, GPC has concerns about supplemental fees and/or differential tuition. Similarly to GPC, students at S&T have concern about the future of supplemental fees and those prices. Currently, engineer students have seen the fee increase by 67%, with another increase potentially on the horizon. Additionally, students are unable to get aid increases to help offset those costs. Additionally, S&T students are building a campaign to help with the Student Emergency Relief Fund. This fund will be used to help students on campus who have fallen into hard times and are in need of food, clothing, or other financial assistance. Thus far, the Chancellor's Office, Staff Council, and Faculty Senate are showing support. S&T is continuing to work on the Student Fitness Center, and the opening date has now been accelerated from July 2019 to April of 2019. S&T students are also going to begin collaborating with the Faculty Senate and Staff Council to create campus listening sessions. These will be open forums for students, faculty, and staff to sit down and look at the different issues occurring within departments. The ultimate goal is so that as a united campus, issues can be worked on together. Their first one will take place this upcoming March. Lastly, at S&T, Student Council and the Residence Hall Association will be hosting a Mental Health Awareness Week in the month of February with the Counseling Center. Each day, a table will be sponsored during lunch and be handing out free gear and information about services available to students to help raise awareness. At UMSL, students are opening the first ever pop-up pantry. This is the first of its kind, and the Hunger Task Force is eager to serve students on February 13th. Students can fill out a form to predetermine what types of foods they will need in order for the task force to build them a custom meal kit based on needs. Additionally, the student government is in high approval of the proposed fiscal year 19 room and board rates. They will not only decrease the costs for students to live on campus, but will also open more options for students to stay during the summer and take classes. This will also help student leaders be incentivized to live on campus due to the discounted rate. This past Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a few hundred students went out in the local St. Louis community and completed a combined amount of over 400 hours of community service. Student service ranged from cleaning up a local school to helping out at the St. Louis Junior Achievement. UMSL students are expressing some concern about the 2 MetroLink train stops on campus. The concern is in connection with an increase in criminal activity that has taken place on campus near those stops. The students would like to see more security presence, but would like to have this discussion with the university. Lastly, UMSL students would like to see more conversation take place with administration regarding construction projects on campus and their timing to help alleviate additional unexpected burdens. At UMKC, their SGA is planning the RFK Symposium for April 6th. This symposium has a rich history at UMKC dating back to 1968. It centers on civic engagement and social justice. Additionally, student leadership is examining student fees and hope to start a dialogue with the Board of Curators surrounding what they have, how they're used, and what alterations the students could use that the board will approve of. Lastly, ASUM has had a busy start to the legislative year. As mentioned in my last report, ASUM is looking at mental health issues, consent education requirements, and tuition caps. ASUM has a task force on mental health issues in higher education. They met for the second time on Friday, January 26. The task force has reviewed findings from 7 internal working groups that outline the full extent of mental health issues in higher education. The group next began a discussion surrounding investments and changes that could be made to remedy this problem. At the end of the semester, a full list of recommendations will be released. This is an important task force for the system. The latest available data from Missouri Partners in Prevention found that 39% of UM system students indicated having considered suicide in their lifetime. 49 have experienced anxiety in the past year, and 25 have experienced major depression in the last year. Additionally, ASUM has written legislation that would proactively address campus sexual violence by requiring discussion of consent and sexual harassment to be included in the sex education curriculum in high schools. Currently, this legislation is both in the House and the Senate and supported by both sides of the aisle. Hearings are expected in the next few weeks, and ASUM would welcome the university's support. Lastly, another priority for ASUM is tuition caps. ASUM has elected to support Senate Bill 912 because of the importance of not only keeping education affordable, but by also maintaining a level of quality that provides students with a good education. ASUM would, however, like to see an amendment, and Natalie Butler just recently testified in the State House about this amendment. And this amendment would change the definition currently in Senate Bill 912 to reflect tuition to cover also course fees and supplemental fees. Finally, ASUM will be hosting 2 student lobby days in Jeff City. One will be for student leaders and take place on February 13th, the other for the rest of the student body on March 6th. I do want to add that after lunch, I was able to speak with some of the student leaders here on campus, and they do express their thanks to the board. They want to extend thanks to the board because the students here are seeing efforts being made, and while the fix may not be perfect at this moment, they do want to express their gratitude to the board for listening and making these changes. I greatly appreciate your attention during this discussion, and I'm open to any questions from the board. Thank you.
Curators, any questions for Student Representative Lauer?
Only compliments.
Thank you.
I have one. As you're going around and talking to the different student groups, and I know that you do that, what would you say our current climate is in student satisfaction?
So, like I said towards the end of the report, I don't think there's an overall consensus that things are perfect by any means, but that there are different things that are happening where the board administrators are more apt to actually listening to students about concerns and moving on the right path. I would highly encourage these conversations to continue taking place and making sure that they take place across the system with all levels of student leaders and their counterparts.
Good advice. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Curator Chapman.
Courtney, thank you for your work. A quick question. How do the students feel about potential tuition hikes? And how have they said that would affect them if you have asked them or gotten any information?
So while it hasn't been a direct pinpoint question that I've asked on every campus, I can tell you from what I've heard, there's of course concerns about the affordability of what tuition will look like, especially if that includes different fees, et cetera, moving forward. However, having the support of ASUM on that Senate Bill 912, I think is a step that we should be talking about and exploring, but also looking at those amendments to the language to make it more of a well-rounded understanding of what the cost of tuition will be, and not more of a surprise once you actually get on campus and you have those fees, et cetera. Affordability, value, but also good education play into that mix.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Again, congratulations on your confirmation.
Thank you.
I would like to go off the agenda just briefly. Those of us who've been on the board for a while have seen tremendous change, and there's been one constant here at the University of Missouri-Columbia campus. And one person who has done tremendous work making these changes. There is no question that this university is better for her having been here. She has served her last day. I'm afraid this is going to be your last meeting, but Garnet Stokes, thank you so much. Stand up, please.
And Jim.
Thank you.
Again, thank you so much, and good luck going forward. Come back and visit us, okay?
Thanks.
We are also very lucky that with Provost Stokes leaving us, that we had a real star, I think, in education ready to step into the breach. Jim Spain, where is Jim? Is Jim here?
Back there, he's there.
Jim
All right.
Spain, as of 8 this morning. Took on the very hard job of provost and is still employed, right? Okay. Anyway, thank you. Moving on to the general business, what we have before the board, and you should have received this in your packets, we have amendments to the collected rules and regulations. Everybody has it and reviewed it, I think, but just a brief explanation, and this actually, any good ideas I have tend to come from other people. Curator Burnsick, in some of the reviews she has done of different campuses and different universities, found out that the boards tended to have a committee that was devoted to external relations. We had external relations with academic affairs before, which to me they don't really mix. I talked to Curator Snowden, who's been chairman of academic affairs now for what, 2 years, Curator? And he agreed with that. And Curator Farmer has generously agreed, if the board approves this change of the rules and the appointment of board memberships, to step forward in this role, because we are trying to create a new committee taking external relations away from the academic affairs so it can focus more on academic affairs, and adding research to it to give us more of a board role in monitoring research, and then to create this new committee on external relations, marketing, and development so that we can work as a university as a whole to develop better strategies, better metrics, and monitor the philanthropy, which is going to become an increasingly important part of university life here, but everywhere else in the country. Any questions or comments by board members? Hearing no questions or comments, could I have a motion and a second to approve the amendment to the collected rules and regulations, creating the new committee on external relations and development?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Are there any noes? So if I remember the way we've changed our rules, that's approved, right? Any abstentions? Now, it is approved. The collected rules are approved. The new committee exists. And so you also received in your board materials the new committees, the executive committee, and the standing committee assignments. Again, I hope that I have sufficiently discussed this with you, but any questions or comments on the board committee assignments? All board assignments have to be approved by rule by the board, so could I have a motion and a second to approve the board executive committee and standing committee assignments that you received in your materials?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Committees are approved. Now we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Again, all items have been received. There was one amendment. I hope everybody got it. Any objections to the consent agenda? Again, we're going to try to expand the use of the consent agenda, so it's important. Any one curator can knock anything off the consent agenda. Hearing no objections to the consent agenda, could I hear a motion and a second to approve the items in the consent agenda as set in your materials and your amended materials?
Move approval.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any?
Hesitant.
We're trying to do things on Moon Choi timing now, so we're moving fast. Any objections? Any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved. I want to say one thing. In the consent agenda was the naming of the Dobbs Building 2. It is now the Lucille Bluford Building, and it has the Gus Ridgel atrium. There was a task force chaired by Curator Chapman and Student Representative Lauer that took that on. Would the members of the task force stand up who are here today? Anybody else? Thank you very much. Thank you. Again, what we're trying to do as a board and as a university is to make sure that we're listening to all voices, and I know that it is an imposition sometimes for some of you to serve on these task force. It takes time away from your jobs and your teaching, but we really appreciate it, and it's what makes the university work. Now, Curator Burnsick, you're up.
All right, the Finance Committee has one information item and two action items today. The first being the information item is the administrative review update for the University of Missouri System, and Vice President Ryan Rapp, who's already approached the podium, will be giving us an update on this project.
Thank you, Curator Burnsick. Hold on. So I just want to provide the board with a brief update on the progress that we've made since the last meeting in December. But before I do that, I did want to go back over the slide that we presented in December and really remind everyone of why we're doing this, and really that there's administrative or operational efficiency is only one of four key things that we know we have to do to drive investment into those mission central areas of research, student success, and other areas. When we think about that, really for our financial sustainability and our financial model to work, we have to deliver on all of those. So that includes academic excellence, revenue enhancement, but just as importantly, it includes operational efficiency and our ability to reduce our administrative cost. And so this project has remained important to us. We continue to work closely with our partners in PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I just wanted to kind of go over the timeline of where we're at. We did the initial assessment with MU and the University of Missouri system. We're now working with the other campuses on integrating them into the plans as we move forward. And more importantly, what we've been focused on currently is what we call an activity analysis. We'll be communicating with all of our staff in the coming weeks. We have a team of over 120 individuals that have been working on this across the university. We have staff representation and faculty representation as we move throughout this process. When we're done with that, we will move into designing what the path looks like forward for our administrative functions. And then as we move into FY19, we will begin implementing those changes. So just to kind of focus on what we've covered since the December meeting. I've kind of already rolled through the activity analysis, but I do want everyone to understand that this is a comprehensive look at what our staff and administrators are doing. So it will include all staff and all administrators, so I, just like any of our other staff, will take the survey. We've identified over 2,200 activities with this group of 120 individuals from across all 4 campuses. We have 22 functions and I think 300 to 400 processes currently to date that we've identified. The rollout of this will be in early February. Again, we've engaged our leadership across UMSL, UMKC, and S&T as well as we start to think about how do we integrate them into the process. We've had a lot of work underway at UMKC with their own project. UMSL continues to move forward on this as well as S&T. We've also started to have discussions about what the operating model is, and it is more than just talking about shared services, but how do we drive integrated support organizations across the 4 campuses. So when it comes to finance, HR, and IT, how do we better integrate and deliver those services? There were non-operating model opportunities that were identified in the report. For example, there were some things in procurement that we could do better with contracting. We continue to move forward on those, but they are really being managed on a separate track from what we're doing around the activity analysis. With that, I'd really ask the board if there's any questions that you might have as it relates to this as we move forward. I would expect that in April we'll have a much more in-depth update because we will have the results of the activity analysis to share with the board.
Could you go back one slide, Ryan?
Yeah.
The operating model design phase, planning underway, February to June. Would you anticipate having an operating model plan by June?
Yes, we would.
What connection or liaison is there between the process on the campuses that's going forward on this administrative review and the strategic planning that's going on almost simultaneously?
So that's a great question. I had it in my notes to address it, and I forgot. So we have a compact around operational excellence, and so actually this is really driving that specific compact, and will be, to me, they're one and the same. It's not a question of we have a compact with operational excellence and we'll have a plan around that, and we'll have that plan. This is part of that plan.
Thanks.
Ryan, based on what you've seen since our last meeting, I know you gave us a range of cuts that you had the potential cuts that you had identified that we could make. Has that range shifted at all? And what does that range look like now in light of potential cuts in our funding from the state?
So I think for our financial model to work, to answer your last question, that really doesn't change what we need to do in this space. So we'll move forward with what we need to do on the cost side regardless, because it really is about being able to drive reinvestment. As far as the range, I think what we know then is, I always said, we realized there was an opportunity there. I think as we move forward, what we're trying to understand is where does the real opportunity lie? And keep in mind, in some of those numbers, it wasn't so much cost cuts as it is cost avoidance in the future. So I'm thinking specifically about the benefits space. It's not so much that we're going to take cost out there, but is there a way to avoid future cost increases as well? I would anticipate that when we come back in April, we'll have a much better idea of what those are. But as far as the ranges, they have not changed.
And what was that range? Could you please remind me?
So I believe it was 40 million, 40 on the low end. The high end was 70. I'd also note, though, that a big part of that was related to our benefits, and we're looking at that separately. And I think we have to be very careful as we evaluate benefits, because that really does have a direct impact on our ability to compete for faculty and staff.
So we should have more concrete, a little bit more concrete information from you at the April meeting about, you know, kind of.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yep.
Right.
Are there any other questions?
I almost took over Julia's meeting. I didn't mean to. If I may. One thing on timing, obviously, we only have curator meetings every so often. Ryan, as you pointed out, we have 4 things we have to hit, and to be a great university, we have to hit all 4, and this is just one of the 4.
Correct.
But we have to hit it. I mean, we have to make these changes, this restructuring, these cuts, and cost avoidance. You would agree, right?
Absolutely. So we showed the chart of that there was a $160 million gap at the end of 5 years at the last board meeting. And when we look at that and say, what do we have to do to execute on that? All 4 of those areas, none of them are optional. So we have to deliver on this in order to get to the financial model that we want.
Curator Berncheck, can I add a comment?
Absolutely.
Related to Curator Phillips's question, we have 5 compacts that are part of the strategic plan. Whether it's research, student success, or engagement, or inclusive excellence, we need to make investments to become a great university. And we believe that the operational excellence will be one mechanism to be able to have more efficiencies that allow us to invest in those 4 areas. So they are linked. They are very, very much linked.
If I could add one other thing too, and because of the importance and because it's linked so much to that, and I know you do this anyway, Ryan, but sometimes I think the public doesn't understand exactly what's going on with the Board of Curators. I hope, and I know you will, keep Curator Bernsick and the Finance Committee advised throughout the time between now and the next committee hearing so that you can be aware of where we stand and how the timeframes are working.
Absolutely. I think that's, we'll be working closely with Curator Bernsick to have monthly updates, and then it'll be a standing agenda item.
Ryan, if you don't mind, I just want to ask, you feel pretty confident we can stay on track and, and hit these goals?
Yeah, there's nothing easy about it. I think when you look at what PwC found in their report is, they shared with us the easy things have been done. What we really have to challenge ourselves to think about is if we're going to continue to deliver these support services in the way we have historically delivered those, there's probably not a lot of opportunity left. What we have to be willing to think about is how can we think differently in terms of delivering our finance, HR, and IT services. So how do we integrate those? I think that's where the opportunity lies.
Thank you.
I think it's fair, based upon your last bullet point, Ryan, to say that that's where we're starting.
Correct.
These other non-operating models, you can't do everything at once.
Yeah.
So some
Yes.
of these other ancillary or auxiliary services are also being examined, but in a separate but parallel track.
Absolutely. And I think for us, we believe if we can get the operating model for these support services right, finding these other opportunities will become easier.
Ryan, when we start talking about timing, we're facing, even bigger cuts, as we all know, from the state this year. It seems as though we would want to get that information first, and then maybe change what we're doing here, because that's a big factor. If we don't get X number of dollars, it seems as though we might be more aggressive here, as opposed to if we do get it, maybe that gives us a little more flexibility here. I don't know. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think we think about that. Part of it, though, would be even if state support were to remain flat, I think we're going to be just as aggressive in executing on this if we see a reduction, because to the president's point, it really is how do we drive investment into those key compacts in our strategic plan, and we're going to need to do that regardless of where state support lands.
And I agree with that. It was whether we're going to be more, even more aggressive, with more cuts. And
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
Are there any other questions for Ryan? Otherwise, we'll move on to our action item. All right. Fiscal year 2019 student housing and dining rates. Ryan, will you please present the recommendations?
Yeah, so the details were included in your mailing materials. Today, I'll present a brief presentation of what's in those materials and then entertain any questions you might have. As you can see here on the slide, I think none of our predominant plans are going up by more than 2%. CPI for the year was 2.1%. As we've noted, we've wanted to focus on affordability. You can see with MU, the predominant plan is going down by 3.5%. If I go through MU's plan, one thing we all want to note is that all halls will be in use in the next year. And that as we look at this, we really are demonstrating our commitment to maintaining affordable options for our students.
Will you take questions as you go?
Yeah, sure.
When you say all halls will be in use, does that mean the 4 that were going to be mothballed but weren't completely mothballed, that they will all now be student housing?
Yes. Now, we will have, one is actually will continue to be used by MU Healthcare as an administrative building. I'm looking for Gary Ward to make sure that's correct. Yeah.
Todd or Rhonda, could you answer that question?
I think,
Gary.
yes.
So yes, we've used one of the halls for the hospital, and all the ones we did not use this year will be used next year. We've done that through different incentives and different marketing plans to be able to attract returning students. And so far, it's been very, very successful.
Very good, excellent.
Thanks.
That's great.
And I just note, our office has looked very closely at these plans from the financial viability of them as well, because we do have a lot of debt service against our housing, and this does work financially. It's a healthy financial plan for us. So I think, just want to note that we are committed to providing affordable housing to our students. UMKC, I think the theme here remains the same. We do have, for our other 3 campuses, we have outsourced food services. We do have some contractual increases that will require the rates to go up slightly. But at the same time, none of the rates that we're proposing today are increasing above CPI. I guess I just said that. And then we have one rate, I think at Missouri S&T, that's increasing by 3%. But again, for our predominant plan, the plan that most of our students select, the rates would only go up by 2%. And much of that's being driven by the meal plan rates with our outsourced provider. For UMSL, many of their plans are actually remaining unchanged, so you're seeing no increase at UMSL with the exception of a few of their housing units are going up by 2%. They're also looking to decrease their summer rates to try to attract more students on campus during that period of time. So with that, I'd ask if there are any questions.
You may have covered this, but last year, I think that we separated the requirement of food to go along with housing so that they had the option.
Mm-hmm.
Are we still doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Any other questions?
All right, if there are no further questions, may I have a motion and a second from the committee to approve the schedule of rates as outlined in the materials here before the members of the board for the residence halls and family student housing on the Mizzou, UMKC, Missouri S&T, and UMSL campuses effective beginning with the 2018 summer session?
Madam Chairman, I'd so move.
Second?
All those in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. And are there any abstentions? All right, looks like the vote is unanimously passed. What else do we have here? All right, we've also got some information here that Vice President Rapp will be presenting on a recommendation that,
It's a good thing, I apologize, Chairman Burnsick, but Steve Owen, who is always doing my thinking for me, reminded me that you have to ask for a motion and a second for a vote by the full board.
oh, could I have a motion and a second by the full board to approve?
So moved.
All
Second.
right. Now, are we done?
Ask for the vote.
Oh, yeah, everyone in favor say aye. I'm a little new to this.
No,
Could
no,
all-
he actually told me I have to do this.
Oh, you've
I'm
got
new
to do
this. I'm new to this, too. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Passed. Thank you.
Next, right? Okay. All right, so the next thing that Ryan's going to present to us on is on the recommendation that Kansas and Heartland tuition rates be established for students who are attending UMKC.
Correct. What we're asking for is approval to move forward with expanding. We currently have the metro rate at UMKC for surrounding counties in Kansas. They're allowed to receive in-state tuition. We're asking, similar to what we did with UMSL last year, that we could expand that to the entire state of Kansas. This was something that we've worked closely with our outside partners in Ruffalo Noel Levitz on, and we believe there's an opportunity as we look out across Kansas to attract some additional students into UMKC. I think right now we're estimating it could provide up to an additional 50 students in the first year. The other thing we're looking to do is expand what we call the Heartland rate. It would allow students from other states in the area it would give them 150% of in-state rates. We currently have a program around that through the Midwest Exchange, and this is just expanding this to other Midwest states. We're asking for the same approval that we received last year as it related to UMSL, in that it will be approved for 5 years. We will bring it back to the board at that period of time to evaluate the effectiveness of it. And if it hasn't been effective, the board could choose to not maintain this. And it will not allow the rate charged to be ever be less than the rate that Missouri undergraduates are paying. Any questions?
I guess I would ask, one, we've had a year of experience, I guess we've had a semester of experience with the Illinois expansion, and have we determined the cost benefit to be a plus in terms of the number and the reduced tuition? In other words, have we gained from that?
I know we have, but I'll let Tom answer that.
Now, I don't have an exact figure for you, Curator, but absolutely. Now, we had anticipated an increase of 100 students. We haven't quite reached the 100 students, but in terms of just more dollars coming in the door, absolutely, yes, it's been cost effective.
And I know we've been seeing increased applications from Illinois students this year. So I think it's really what is it going to provide for this coming year, because we rolled it out late last year. So I think we'll have more information to report probably next year at this time.
And as I understand that we're going to evaluate that year to year to see whether the 100% in-state is the right incentive or not.
Correct, yes.
So
I mean,
maybe,
there are different rates. I mean, with the with the Midwest Compact, they've got a transfer rate which is somewhere in between out-of-state and in-state, which seems to work for the 12 states that are partnering in that particular activity.
thanks.
I would clarify, the Heartland rate will allow us to expand into states like Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. They're currently not in the Midwest Exchange.
Are there any other questions?
I think this is a great initiative, and I'm excited to see it and what new students will come to the university.
Yep, thank you.
I was in Atchison the last 3 days with a client, and one of them has a son that's going to be going to college, and they live in Atchison, Kansas, just on the other side of the border. He said, "I wish we could send him to UMKC, but the out-of-state tuition." And I said, "I think that's going to change. So I know you got 1 of 50.
Well, good.
We got 49 to go.
From a competitive standpoint, the state of Missouri is a net exporter of students to Kansas. So hopefully with this change that we can become a net importer of students.
Very exciting. All right, if there's no further discussion, may I have a motion and a second from the committee to approve a special tuition rate for Kansas resident undergraduate students and a special tuition rate for Arkansas, Iowa, Kentucky, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Texas resident undergraduate students be established effective the fall 2018 term as outlined in the materials before the members of the board for students attending UMKC.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Any abstentions?
Okay, now I've woke up, and Curator Burnsick, would you like to make a motion to the full board along the lines of the one just passed by the Finance Committee?
I would love to.
Second. Need a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you. I think that's it. Curator Burnsick, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oh, she's good. I will get this right by the next meeting.
May I have a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee?
So moved. Second.
Thank you.
Okay, I jumped the gun. Curator Graham, this job is not as easy as you made it look.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Steelman. The Audit Committee, just as a reminder, consists of Curators Graham, Burnsick, Farmer, and Snowden. And I'm pleased to call upon our interim Chief Audit Executive, Michelle Peranio, who will provide an overview of the materials that have been sent out to us. We've got 2 information items, the internal audit and quarterly report, and the ethics and compliance report for 2017. So, Michelle, thank you very much for being here, and we look forward to the report.
Thank you, Curator Graham. And before you is the accounting of our work since the September 2017 report to the Audit Committee. And I would just like to speak of one particular audit that was conducted of the 5, and that was the MU School of Medicine Human Resources Processes Audit, which had the highest ranking of all 5 audits, risk ranking of 4. Our audit work indicated that the HR work is distributed among the departments and that the staff performing the HR functions in those departments were not originally hired for their HR knowledge. Formal training for the HR staff, including an introduction to HR rules and regulations for managers, has not been provided. And this has led to variation in the understanding of employment regulations, variable approaches to work, and exposure of the School of Medicine to the risk of noncompliance with state and federal employment regulations. There were also a lack of metrics focused on talent acquisition and workforce development, with responsibility for talent acquisition and recruiting activities primarily, again, at the departmental level. And I do want to recognize and acknowledge that the reorganization and restructuring within the School of Medicine was already underway prior to this audit, because they saw that it was very important to provide greater support for the HR functions to all of those departments. They had already identified this as a top concern. Management has agreed, as a result of this audit, to look at the structure necessary to improve HR competencies and support of the departments, to look at staff-specific recruiting and hiring strategy processes that focus on talent acquisition and also workforce development specific to the needs of all the departments, and to establish metrics to measure success in talent acquisition and workforce development efforts, and to improve the onboarding activities. Much of this work is already underway, and the particular management action plan to structure, how they structure that within the School of Medicine is being done in conjunction with and aligned with all of the efforts of the administrative review that you heard Vice President Rapp refer to prior to this. So are there any questions about any of the internal audit work or this particular audit?
Yes, in the materials that we got in reference to the management action plan summary, talks about the medical school and MU Health essentially working together on a strategic human resources plan. And the prelude to that talks about, well, it's grown up decentralized and therefore focused on transactional. To what extent will the administrative review, which is basically becoming more efficient, but what will that focus, how will that focus on whether that's going to continue to operate entirely separately from a human resources standpoint from the university? I think it's currently quite separate except for some legal oversight, but in terms of the MU system vice president of human resources, will there be some greater oversight? Do we know that yet?
Yes, I think the real driver is to centralize more the HR functions, finance functions, different functions, so that you get for the entire organization throughout all the schools and departments and across the campuses a better expertise, and that will be aligned. How that's done remains to be seen, but there is already a lot of collaborative effort between the system HR and the MU campus HR and the MU healthcare HR. The School of Medicine is interesting because both the HR units from the health system and from the campus are involved. But the collaborative efforts are already underway, and I believe the administrative review is providing some guidance and support and data to help understand even more formally how to structure that.
That's a good answer. It sounds like it's a yes, that there will be system supervision more in HR over MU Health than there has been. When we get to the audit portion, I think MU Health kind of sticks out like a sore thumb in terms of the complaints. And so I'm gratified with your answer, and when we get to audit, we can talk about that.
Any other questions on the internal audit work?
Curator Graham, if I may.
Yes.
I want to follow up a little bit on Curator Phillips, and this question's directed to you, but also to an extent towards Curator Graham is Chair of Audit, but he's also on Health Affairs, and Curator Phillips, you've been on Health Affairs for quite a while now. Do we coordinate between these committees so that, does the Health Affairs Committee and the Audit Committee share this information? How do we?
It's a good question, and being brand new on Health Affairs, but having served as Chair of Audit earlier, I think the answer to that is not as well as should be done. I think you raise a good point, and I think that we can address that.
Well, and the reason I bring that up is we also have the external expertise on the Health Affairs Committee, both Teresa Milady and Ron Ashworth, who are extraordinarily well versed on this, and so.
Oh, I think that's a good point.
It seems to me we ought to be able to kind of collaborate on those committees.
It happens to come up in today because our internal audit happened to do an audit of some of the HR functions at MU Health. So by chance, it's giving us an opportunity to compare the two. And we're revising the reporting system, it sounds like, which probably is timely.
Curator Graham.
Michelle, do you or Ryan have any thoughts on that? On more coordination between?
I think it is something that actually we had been discussing maybe a week or so ago about the possibility of making sure when we have the Health Affairs Committee meetings, providing an update as it relates to those audits that are specific to healthcare.
Yes, and that will also come up in the next subject I'm going to address, risk assessment, because We work collaboratively to do a risk assessment on the healthcare side, and then we also do one on the higher ed side. So I'm working with Curator Graham, and I'm sure he will involve you to discuss how we present those results, particularly for the healthcare risk assessment, to your committee.
Curator Sunvolt is the new chair of the Health Affairs, and unfortunately, he couldn't be with us today. But I would ask that you, Ryan, and of course Curator Graham, talk to him about including this sort of audit, because we've received so much information, Ryan, over the years on the risk of the health system. It's a tremendous benefit to the university, but also has the most risk.
We'll do that.
Good idea. Shelley, where do we stand on the field work that's being done in connection with purchasing cards? That's something we've talked about over the last several years, and we need to smooth out that program and update it. Where do we stand on that?
We have completed all of the detailed work to look at 2 years, retrospective look of 2 years of purchasing card transactions. We are in the process of now going out in the field to talk to people personally to understand why certain things have happened. And we are also completing our assessment of the new structure to weigh against what occurred in the past against the new structure and how many of those issues will have been addressed with the new structure. So we will be out in the field this month, and we hope to have draft reports in March to start sharing with management and then be able to bring to the board.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any other questions?
I've got a question, and this may be better suited to the Health Affairs Committee, but Audit is obviously looking at different financial measures within the healthcare system. I'm just wondering, is there a separate sort of compliance and risk analysis ongoing with specific healthcare fraud types of issues and concerns that can be very costly if there are violations?
Ryan or Michelle, either one can address that.
Yes, we are beginning the work on the fiscal year 2019 risk assessment and audit plan, and this will be presented at the June 2018 Board of Curators meeting for consideration and approval. So I really wanted to just have a brief comment about that here and get it on your radar screens. So in developing the risk assessment, we will conduct meetings with senior leadership and operational management. That will be across the 4 campuses. That will be with the health system. We do this in conjunction with the Chief Compliance Officer, helps coordinate this across the health system. And we do integrate looking at compliance risks and looking at risks to achieving our strategic plan or any business risks or major objectives that we have. So this is the formal touch-in, annual touch-in of where are we as an entire organization in terms of our opportunities and challenges and how we are best positioned to meet those. And I believe that these meetings are important at these different levels in the organization and across all of our entities, because we need to gather all the perspectives and understand at all those levels that not just our industry challenges and industry risks that everybody has, but how does that apply to us specifically? How do we get down to what does that mean for us? Because a lot of our risk, where it lies, really depends on what we're trying to do, number one, and it also depends on how we're structured to address that. If, for instance, cybersecurity, every industry has that as a risk. If you have no program for that and you're not really paying attention to it as a business, you're extremely high risk. If you have a cybersecurity team, if you have security, if you're looking at that stuff constantly and making changes, then your risk is less. So that's the kind of detail we're trying to get to with a risk assessment. So when we bring those, the risk assessment and the audit plan forward for your consideration, these are some of the questions. As a governing body, I believe it's important to really consider is are we appropriately focused on those risks that impact us the most? And is the plan focused on those risks and at the appropriate level within the organization? And does internal audit have the resources to support delivery of the plan, or do we need to look at other ways to also supplement that work. So are there any additional questions? But yes, we do collaborate very closely with the healthcare side to do the healthcare piece of that risk assessment.
If there are no more questions, Michelle, thank you very much.
Well,
You got, no, you can go to another,
just-
I'm
well,
sorry, we
no.
got another informational item.
The
and that
only
is
other
the,
thing is
hotline.
the hotline report, and that was in your packet or your materials. And I will say that we continue to close these in a timely manner and work with the campuses to raise awareness of the hotline and its appropriate use. But I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have about that report.
So
I had one question. On the hotline, it looked like you had one campus, I think it was St. Louis, that didn't have any calls at all. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And why would that be? I mean, we've got, over the other campuses, and especially at Columbia campus and the healthcare system, we've got multiple calls.
We are working with the campuses to get the awareness of the hotline out there better, particularly getting it posted on the landing pages on the web for students, faculty, staff, so they can see the hotline, constantly reminded it's there. Because we believe it's just an awareness issue, that there is a line that people can call. And we've gone to all the campuses and met about that, and we're working with them to identify how better to get that out there.
Would you say that we're getting better every time, every year, with regard to the hotline or not?
Compared to national benchmarks, nationally, calls per 100 employees are going up slightly. For us, our numbers are coming down a bit, and that's both for the healthcare side and the higher education side. I really believe it's getting out there and working more with the people at the campuses, the appropriate people at the campuses, and to get it into their orientation, to remind people, to have the reminders that we have this way of reporting. We encourage that if you have any concerns and issues, please report them to your supervisor, report them to your HR departments. You can report internally first. If you don't feel comfortable, this is an anonymous way to report, and we will take that very seriously and follow up on it. It's keeping that before everybody. Healthcare has been mandated to have a line for a number of years, and they constantly are promoting ours, which is why we get more calls on the healthcare side than we do the higher ed side. But we're starting that conversation, and I believe with increased awareness, that should shift.
Any other questions?
Yes. So the chart that we were provided that shows the what we call the ethics and compliance hotline does show that over half of the hotline calls are in MU Health, and I trust that means both the medical school and MU Health Care, which is the clinical side.
It depends on the nature of the call if it's reported from the medical school. Because the medical school staff and faculty are hired by the MU campus, the calls are referred to them, especially if it's an HR issue or that matter for them to manage. So the medical school is the one place where it's kind of split, depending on the nature of the call.
We have a whole clinical staff that really don't do much academic, maybe don't even have academic appointments, but are part of the MU Health Care, right?
Yes, and they're hired through the MU campus.
Right.
Well, actually, the university physicians through, but yes,
So they do show up in this pie chart.
yes.
So you can't read a lot into this because part of it has to do with the encouragement of people to make those calls, whether it's published, whether it's readily accessible, whether it's in the MU Healthcare handbook and so forth, or whether it's in the various college handbooks and how well they publicize it. But I wanted to point out, I think the medical school is making great progress on the MU campus in terms of discrimination, diversity. In the past year, the numbers have gone up. But when you broaden that to the overall system and you take in the clinical employees, of our system, and you look at what kinds of complaints there are, the largest core, there aren't that many medical complaints. I calculated a total of only 13 out of 114. And the vast majority, or I should say the largest sector, is human resources. And that is mostly discrimination, harassment, sexual, inappropriate behavior, retaliation, retribution. And I think it's maybe a red flag that, again, is human resources on the healthcare side. I'm not saying the medical school specifically, but the clinical side. Are they being properly schooled and trained to avoid those kinds of complaints? Because if a majority of them come from MU Health, and they're really not that part of our academic aspect, that's why I'm hopeful that there'll be some greater oversight so that the clinicians, particularly the physicians, have better training and we can reduce the number of complaints coming from that aspect. So I wanted to make that point. I noticed that the dean of medical school here is here, and I think he really deserves credit for increasing the diversity, but we'll see how we do next year in terms of the number of complaints that come from the clinical side of our business.
Okay.
That's the point I wanted to make.
Thank you, John. Any other questions, comments? Michelle, thank you.
Thank you.
Just as Ryan gets ready to come up, for some of the newer curators, this internal audit model has really only been in existence for a few years, the way we're doing it now, and continue to modify it. It has really improved the way we do it, and it has proved the value of the way we do it now, painfully, unfortunately, in a couple of instances. But it is, Ryan did a great job getting it going, and Michelle's doing a great job keeping it going. So I want to thank both of them. Vice President Ryan Rapp is here. We have one action item, and that is the engagement of our independent auditors for the audit that ends June 2018. Ryan?
Thank you, Curator Graham. Just to provide some context, in FY 2015, we put out for bid our external audit services. It's a practice to put that out every 5 years for bid, but then bring the contract back to the board each year for approval. I would note that while it is going up by 2.2%, it's still a 22% decrease from the fee that we paid previously. I'd ask if the board has any questions, but we are asking that we have approval to continue with BKD as our external auditor.
Any questions of Ryan? If not, the chair of the committee of Burnsick, Farmer, Snowden, and Graham would entertain a motion to approve the contract with BKD as proposed by Vice President Rapp.
So moved.
Second?
All members of the committee in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. See no abstentions, the motion is carried. On behalf of the audit committee, then, I would like to propose to the full board that we approve the Vice President for Finance be authorized to employ the firm of BKD LLP to provide the audit services to the University of Missouri for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2018.
Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you, Curator Graham.
Now, from the committee, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting of the audit committee.
So moved.
Yes, good. We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
All in favor from the committee, say aye.
Aye.
Nay? Opposed? No abstention? That concludes the business of the audit committee, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Curator Graham. And I want to echo the fact going to the internal audit was one of the best decisions this board has made.
It absolutely was.
Been tremendous value. I believe we are to governance, Curator Lehman.
Thank you, Chairman Steelman. You'll see a couple different items on here. The first one is Collected Rules and Regulations Review Update. And this is an effort that Curator Burnsick is leading. However, talking to Curator Burnsick and other members of our committee, we've looked at this, and it seems to make the most sense, this is the consensus of my committee, to have this follow the university task force. So once we get that done, so we don't do this and then redo this. Would you agree, Curator Burnsick?
Yeah, I think if we can figure out what the system is supposed to ultimately be and what that is going to look like in terms of the interaction and services provided to the campuses, I think the rules are going to follow that strategy. So I think we'll have a better sense for, think of procurement and all the different ways that can be done. I think we'll have a better sense once we've figured out what model we're strategically aiming for.
Chairman Stillman, you agree?
Absolutely. It's, there's going to be a lot of hard work put in by that task force, which Curator Burnsick, you're a member, and as you said, the collected rules should be following that work, not the work following the collected rules.
Yeah, that's a cart before the horse, I think.
Yeah.
But there is still work that's ongoing in terms of identifying the systems that we are looking at aspirationally, as well as the other schools that I'd mentioned maybe 2 meetings ago that we were looking at. That work is still ongoing to build out the list of comparisons so that once we actually do send that out for review, it's going to be hopefully a little bit easier. We've also engaged, with the help of Nick Beidler in Steve's office. He's been very gracious with his time. We've been able to secure a couple of law school students who are agreeing to help with the project, and will receive some externship credit for their participation. So there's still work being done there, but I do think that we need to get some answers before we pose the questions.
Thank you, Curator Burnsick. Moving on, our second informational item is the University Task Force. I'd like to ask Curator Chapman, who's leading that effort, to give us an update.
Thank you, Curator Lehman. A few weeks ago, I had spoke to Curator Stillman, who had mentioned, and Dr. Troy. They had mentioned putting together a task force to look at what does it mean to be the University of Missouri. Under our collective rules, it states that we are to operate as one University of Missouri, and that includes all 4 campuses. So we thought about how do we brainstorm, get some ideas together on how to achieve that lofty mission, which I think we can accomplish. So we put together a task force, which includes all of our chancellors from each campus, President Choi, Chairman Stillman, Julia, John Phillips, myself, and Steve. And also Cindy's been helping us out as well. So part of the process is we had a meeting about a week ago to just lay the groundwork. What's our time frame on this? What kind of questions will we be answering? We also had Terry McTaggart from AGB. You guys are familiar with him. He helped us with our board assessment in December, which I thought really helped us kind of decide what kind of board we want to be, what kind of direction we want to go, what some of our aspirational goals are as a board. So Terry's going to provide us his expertise. He's going to give us some readings, some advice on how to achieve the one university concept, and how far do we go with that? What are the how do some of those campuses retain some autonomy? But he's going to give us some of the expertise and background that we need in order to make the decisions or roadmap that we need here at the university. So some of those questions that we've posed to the task force, I just want to go through them and have some of the other curators chime in, think about it as we move forward. But we've asked the task force to report to us or answer these questions. So they're going to give us answers as of next week. And then we'll reconvene with Terry. Terry's going to have individual interviews with everyone that answered those questions. And then we're going to meet another time to kind of hash through what does this look like, what does this mean. We're going to meet again. And then at the April board meeting, we plan to present our findings to the entire board, open it up for discussion. And what we'd like is something that tells the system what their role is, and the campuses what their roles are, and what the campuses' roles are with each other. And of course, like I said, Terry's gonna do that presentation. He's got a lot of skill and expertise. He's gonna decide what campuses or systems out there have already tried to do this, what that should look like, and we're gonna bat those ideas around and come up with something that works for us. And I think this is gonna be kind of a living, breathing thing. As we move on, we may need to make changes, but we're gonna come up with something that we think we can that can really help us move things forward. So I want to present these questions to you that we've asked the task force to answer. Number one, what is the role of the system with the campuses? And what is the role of the campuses with one another? Number three, what decisions need to be made at the system and/or campus level? Number four, how do we get decisions made on a timely basis? How do we decrease campus and system red tape? Number five, when is shared governance applicable? Shared governance is very important within systems, but when is it applicable and when is it not applicable? Number six, who breaks ties when there is a standoff between campuses? Sometimes we have disputes between the campuses, and we need to decide how we resolve those in an effective way. Number seven, how does the system drive change, innovation, and collaboration? Number eight, how can the system improve efficiencies in shared services? I'd also like to get a definition of what shared services are. When we talked to the faculty this morning, I think I heard a lot of things that would be considered shared services. I think we've talked about other ones which are more obvious, IT, there's several others, but how do we improve those efficiencies there? Eliminate existing silos and duplication, maintain academic excellence, as we eliminate and add programs and incorporate distance learning. And all of those questions will be asked within the framework of achieving excellence in student success, research breakthroughs, and effective management. So I think this is an ambitious activity that we've decided to engage in, but I do think that the benefits will be tremendous if we're able to get more clarity on what we are, how we define ourselves as a system, what it means to be a part of the University of Missouri, and I think it'll increase communication amongst our campuses, increase efficiencies. I found it very useful to talk to our faculty this morning, and one of the faculty mentioned this type of Facebook or something that looks like Facebook amongst the faculty, so that you can type in a word, maybe a research topic, and you can pull up several faculty from different campuses, and maybe they can team up together and collaborate on a grant or do whatever. But ideas like that to kind of make us one university, I think are things we're going to think about. And also library resources. These are simple things. Library resources. How do we deal with those licensing agreements that may create silos, not encourage or allow other campuses or students to be able to use library resources? I think we need to work on stuff like that. But these are small things. There's a lot of different things we're going to consider. And so we're excited about moving forward on it. Any questions from the board? This is going to be, we really want this to be a ground-up activity. You guys, the chancellors on the campuses, that's why we're getting information from you. We really want your expertise, knowledge, so that we can try to implement systems or processes that make this system or University of Missouri better. So, any questions?
If I might.
Yes.
I really consider this work one of the most important things the board's going to do this year, and I really appreciate the people who are willing to serve on it. I think it is very important to keep the entire board engaged in this, and so I know that Mr. McTaggart's going to be providing reading materials. I think what we should just do as a matter of course is to make sure that every board member has those reading materials. Obviously, the work is going to fall upon the task force members, but that way we can approach the meeting hopefully with more groundwork. I'd also ask Darrell to let's make sure we try to keep the whole board to some extent involved and knowledgeable of where we stand, so that when we get to the time, because I'm hoping that we can actually have decision items at the end of this, and it would be easier if we're not springing new decisions on the board. And I should have said that earlier. I just had that thought as I'm watching the entire board here.
Good. I'll be sure to keep the entire board informed, because we will value, any opinions and suggestions and comments that we get as we move forward. Any other questions or comments?
Good luck, gonna be a lot of work.
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Curator Chapman. That was a great update. I appreciate what you're doing. I think this is a very important job, and I appreciate everybody on that task force putting in all this effort. We have one other item that's not listed, and that is, I'd like Dusty Schneiders, our Director of Government Affairs, to come up and give us a quick update.
Yes, thank you, Curator Lehman. I would like to give a quick update to the board on the first month of session and give you an idea of where our priorities stand right now. We've been working hard down in Jeff City over the first month. I was down there today and I got stopped 3 times in the hallway praising President Choi about how engaged he is with the legislators. For an example, one person down there today said she's been working there for over 30 years and has never seen a president this engaged. And it's just not President Choi. All 4 chancellors have been down there as well. One thing when I started in November, one of the goals that I wanted to do was to get all 4 chancellors down there at least once a month or once a week. So all of them have been down there one time or another during the week, the past 4 weeks. So and we've been getting great reception out of that. For our priorities, our first and foremost priority is trying to restore some of our core funding. President Choi and I, and along with the chancellors, have been engaged with a lot of the key legislators, talking about the core funding and trying to restore that. And they are, out of all the meetings, I haven't heard back from one of you guys or the meetings that I've been in of they're engaged and they support us and they're looking to see what they can do. Right now, it's currently too early in the budget process to figure out exactly where we could maybe get some money, extra money from, but that is our number 1 priority. Our second priority would be Senate Bill 912, and we're getting great reception out of that as well. We had a committee hearing yesterday, and it went very well. The committee was very receptive of what we were doing, and Senator Rowden is sponsoring that bill, and he had a committee sub which would allow us to move our tuition above CPI a percentage point. Right now it's at 10%. But we know that number's not going to be there. But the one thing that he added into the committee sub was if the core money was there, we would not be able to do CPI plus a percentage point. It would just be we could raise our tuition rates by CPI. So that is a bill that it protects us and them as well. So I think that's getting good reception around the Capitol. And then third, our third priorities are to try to get some of our line items priorities done, like the Springfield Clinical Campus, the partnerships that we have with other universities. And I'm very optimistic that we would be able to get some of those done. And if you guys have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Dusty?
I just want to ask you, Dusty, have you had any luck with our new capital projects and how we're rolling out our plan? Has the legislator been responsive to our efforts to align our capital needs to our strategic priorities?
So if I may answer that question, I think they feel that it's a little too early to discuss the capital project because when they ask us what are our priorities, it's in that order of first core budget and then Senate Bill 912, but very close behind are the collaborative programs. But we did discuss with them some of our key projects that we need, including the Science and Computing and Engineering Building at UMKC, as well as the TPMC.
Jeff, when is the legislative day that you had mentioned?
Oh, yeah.
February 28th.
February 20th.
Yes.
What does that look like for those of us that haven't, engaged before?
So this year is going to be a little different than years past. From the time that I was there, working in the legislators, legislative day, everyone has a legislative day. And they become very numb to the legislators. When you're pulling, we bring, for the past couple of years, we've been bringing 500-600 people to the building, supporters of the system. And senators and representatives, they just get numb when they get pulled out of a committee hearing 3 times to talk to local constituents. So I tried to steal something out of what I thought was very successful when I worked there. It was the Great Northwest Days. They have a off-campus site at the Capitol Plaza, and they show off all the economic impact, the businesses, how it intertwines the whole state, how they're an engine up in the northwest part of Missouri, and every single legislator goes to this thing. They said on an average year, they see between 500 and 700 people, not only legislators, but governor staff, department heads, things like that. So what I plan to do on February 28th is to get healthcare, extension, our 4 campuses, research, economic development, partnerships with the system, and show them what the economic impact and all the good things we're doing as a system to the legislators. That some of them don't exactly know what we're doing and how we impact the state. So that is the one thing that I would really like to do, and that's what we're doing on February 28th.
I have a question about that. So in the past, we've modestly used extension in lobbying on legislative day.
Yes.
And now that we've got Marshall Scott and the passion behind it and a good salesman, are we planning on having enough extension people on
Yes,
a
we're
legislative
gonna
day to
have-
cover the appropriate parts of
I
Missouri?
believe April 17th, I've been talking to Marshall about this. April 17th, we're going to have a appreciation day down there with 4-H and extension, and have more of a just thank you for your support, and not going out there, have them actually saying, lobbying on behalf. It's just thank you for your support. We appreciate everything. It's more of a toned down, not toned down, but more of a relaxed type of a day for them to go and see their local legislators and walk around the Capitol.
So that's different than the legislative day?
Yes, yes.
So,
Let me ask this question. On your February 28th, you're going to change it up, as you said.
Yes.
Is that going to be at the Capitol Plaza as well,
It's going to be at the Doubletree Hotel.
the DoubleTree?
Yes.
So how do you get the legislators from the Capitol over there to really look at this?
That's a good question. I believe we're going to try to have some kind of transportation, a shuttle.
Yeah.
But I've strategically tried to plan this from 4:30 to 7:30 in the afternoon.
So it's after they adjourn then?
Yes, so the
You've got the speaker and the president pro tem locked into what
Yes.
you're doing and
Yes.
what we're trying to accomplish?
Yes.
Because the experience is, once you get into that Capitol building, you don't want to leave there, and there's so much going on that you get distracted with outside things. But
Yep.
it sounds like, you've got a plan, and maybe that'll work.
Yeah, and one thing that I've said is, once we get them in the room, we have their undivided attention. And I have a feeling we'll get quite a bit of them in the room.
So do you have a dinner plan, let's say, after that, or along with that, or anything like that?
No.
Or is that's separate?
Yep.
Okay.
We planned it around, so the House is usually done around 4:30. They adjourn for the day, and then the Senate usually takes a dinner break between 5:30, from 5:30 to 7, to where they can come and visit, walk through there, look at everything all the exhibits that we have, and then they can either hang out there or go to dinner, and then come back, and they'll probably go back into session after that, or they might adjourn. I don't know.
Any other questions for Dusty?
I have one. Dusty, I don't know if everybody knows this, but you, of course, have been in the Capitol for several years.
Yes.
Where were you before taking your job working with us?
I was the chief of staff for the president pro tem of the Senate.
And for how long?
Well, for that job, for 2.5 years, but I've been the chief of staff for Ron Richard previously for 5 years, and 2.5 years was for the floor leader's position, and the other 2.5 years was for the pro tem's office.
And the reason I ask that is so you have seen the attitude of the University of Missouri in the General Assembly for almost the entire last decade or close to it.
Yes.
How would you characterize the attitude in Jeff City from legislators today towards the university compared to what it's been in the past?
Very positive. I think we're starting to really connect with them now again. And it's President Choi and the chancellors have done a great job making themselves available down there and showing them all the good stuff that we're doing.
And I think you're being modest too. I think you've had a lot to do with that. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Great job.
Dusty, thank you very much, and I want to say, every time I call him, he's in the Capitol, which is a good sign, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dusty, we're really getting good reports on your work over there. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to personally thank you for helping and getting me confirmed.
Not a problem.
Great job.
Thank you.
Can I get
Good
a
job.
motion to adjourn? Oh, I'm sorry, John?
Am I up?
No, I thought,
We got to get him adjourned first.
yeah, I'm sorry. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Thank you very much, Curator Lehman. As I announced, Curator Sunvolt couldn't be with us today, and so I have asked, and he's graciously agreed to take over. Curator Phillips has a lot of experience on the Health Affairs Committee.
But not a lot of public report on this occasion. Our only action item, actually, is the approval of minutes for December 1 and December 7 of the Health Affairs Committee. And so those on the committee who, in addition to John, who's absent and was nice enough not to come shake our hands, I think he has the flu, am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Would be Marcy Graham and Teresa.
Hi, I'm here.
And myself and Phil Snowden. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
All those in
Second.
favor?
Second. I second.
Second. Okay, Marcy seconds. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, the minutes have been approved. We do have a couple of matters that need to be dealt with in executive session, so I will move for us to go into executive session. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? We go into executive session for the Health Affairs Committee. Before that, we now go to general business for an executive session. Do you want me to make that motion?
If you would, please.
All right. Moved for the board to go into executive session.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Board stands in executive session.
I would like to say very quickly, Ms. Milady, it's nice to see you here. Both you and Mr. Ashworth have very graciously agreed to continue to serve. It's a real service, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Oh, we have to have a roll call on
Roll call?
executive sessions, on both of them. You have to do the committee first and then the full board.
All right, back to the committee. We had a
And John,
motion-
you've done this before.
We have a motion and a second on the committee going into executive session. Cindy, would you call the roll?
Curator Graham,
Yes.
Ms. Milady,
Yes.
Curator Phillips,
Yes.
Curator Snowden.
Yes.
Okay, all votes in favor?
And now, we have a motion and a second for the full board. Cindy, would you call the roll for executive session?
I move executive session.
Curator Burnsick,
Yes.
Curator Chapman,
Yes.
Curator Farmer,
Yes.
Curator Graham,
Yes.
Curator Lehman,
Yes.
Curator Phillips,
Yes.
Curator Snowden,
Yes?
Curator Steelman.
Yes.
Okay, all votes in favor.
And will somebody call Curator Cups and tell him that we finished this meeting ahead of schedule?
You were so good, Mr. Chairman.
Board stands adjourned and going into executive session.